Greetings. Thank you for joining us. My name is Veda Ajamu. I am the Director of Community Engagement and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiatives at the National Civil Rights Museum. I am also an advocate for criminal justice reform. As a part of our Journey to Justice series, we are co-hosting with FAMM the Vanishing Trial virtual screening and panel discussion. The documentary speaks to the penalty of going to trial, better known as the trial penalty. The film brings awareness to an issue that is a grave injustice and grossly impact Black and Brown people. This partnership is important because FAMM is on the front lines fighting for criminal justice reform. I will now turn it over to Kevin Ring, president of FAMM.
Thanks, Veda. We're so happy to partner with you and the National Civil Rights Museum for this screening. For 30 years, FAMM has been fighting to repeal extreme one-size-fits-all mandatory minimum sentencing laws. We have tried to show that these laws destroy families and communities, especially communities of color, without making us safer. In this film, which we co-produced with our friends at the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, we try to show how mandatory minimum sentencing laws not only destroy people, but distort our entire criminal justice system. They've helped create an environment in which 97% of people accused of crimes are willing to forfeit their right to a trial just to avoid extra years, if not decades, in prison. But don't take our word for it. See for yourself. Let's watch The Vanishing Trial.
The government will punish anyone who exercises their right to a trial.
This is not a healthy way to administer justice.
If an individual wants to go to trial, they risk a much longer sentence.
But he was adamant that he was going to put his faith in the trials.
And I didn't see how I could lose by going to trial.
I just cried so hard. I just thought, I'm cooked.
There should be no question that the trial penalty affects everyone.
People plead guilty because if they don't, they could lose everything.
Wow, I felt so many different emotions watching this powerful film. Who would have thought that you could be punished for going to trial? I want to welcome our distinguished panel, all of whom are catalysts for change. I'm going to turn first to Kevin Ring. This great documentary was produced by FAMM, and we see how you were punished for going to trial. Tell us why FAMM made this documentary, and were you aware of the trial penalty before you were arrested?
Thanks, Veda. And I am so grateful for this opportunity to be joined by this distinguished panel. And I really want to thank Gwinnett Yao and Travis Edwards from our team, who did all of the work on this film and labored on it for over a year. And thank the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers for their support for the project. I was not aware of the trial penalty until my experience. And it was while working at FAMM, while I was being investigated by the government, that I saw this play out for other people in much worse ways than it was for me. So once I realized that the prosecutors had decided I was the bad guy and that they wanted to charge me, I realized at that point my only hope was to have an independent judge at some point make a determination, a different view of me than the prosecutors had. So I was waiting for my day in court. But I realized that even as I was being threatened with 20 years in prison, the government had less leverage over me because it wasn't a mandatory minimum sentence. And so while I was going through this process myself, I was working at FAMM, and reading and writing about stories of other people, usually people of color, who didn't have the resources and advantages I did, who were facing the same types of threats I were, but they were being threatened with mandatory sentences, which made the agony and the pressure even worse, because they knew if they lost at trial, there was going to be no say for the judge. And at least I knew enough, having been an attorney and having worked on Capitol Hill, that maybe the judge, might take a different view after sitting through my trial, different view than what the prosecutors had. But I will say, even though it wasn't a mandatory sentence, it was excruciating. And but it did open my eyes to the process and to the distortion of power between prosecutors and judges. And that's created by mandatory sentences, because the threat they have is the mandatory sentence and the long sentence. And so, my experience clearly opened my eyes, but working at FAMM, during the trials helped me as well.
Well, I commend you, Kevin, for taking your experience and the work that you do at FAMM in bringing awareness to the issue. So now I would like to go to Attorney Morales. As a prosecutor, you understand oh too well about the process and the trial penalty. So would you please just talk a little bit about that? And then I would also like to know, what is your position as it relates to the trial penalty?
Thank you. And I want to commend everybody for their work on this film, for their work on these issues, and, advocacy and honesty about everything that is impacting people who come through the criminal legal system, who are charged with offenses that could result in the taking away of their freedom. So thank you guys for all your work, first of all. The trial penalty is something that, quite frankly, is harmful. It is damaging. It destroys people's lives. It destroys and disrupts families and generations of families. It is something that, as we saw in the film, a lot of people don't know about. Everybody understands about the right to a trial. Many of us, including myself, I advocate for people to engage in the process of serving as jurors. There's a lot of trust in the community with judges, but people don't realize the power that many prosecutors hold with the ability to determine whether or not they will go forward with a jury trial and seek a mandatory minimum life sentence for people, or whether they will be fair regardless of whether or not a person will enter into a plea agreement. And so my position, I will make very clear, I'm opposed to the trial penalty. I'm opposed to people playing games, quite frankly, with a person's life, because that's what prosecutors are doing. There's a lot of ego that goes into that. There's a desire to win that goes into that. And it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with treating an individual fairly who's been charged with committing a crime. And that's really, it's really that simple. And, I try to aspire every single day to speak to the people in my office who have these, the power to make these types of decisions, to ensure that they are doing right by people. To understand that as public servants, we don't just represent quote unquote victims or witnesses, but we represent the entire community, which means that we represent the accused as well. And we owe them the duty of ensuring that they are treated fairly. So I am completely against a trial penalty. I abhor, the disservices that people who are supposed to be tasked with serving people are doing. I am completely against systemic racism, which sometimes trial penalties manifest in that way. It truly is a way to, it seems like, disenfranchise and punish those who already have not been invested in throughout the course of, their lives, and drag them through unnecessary hurt, when really, again, we should be seeking justice. We should be seeking the truth. And, that has absolutely nothing to do with penalizing someone for exercising a right to go to trial. So I very much look forward to this entire discussion. But in me, as a prosecutor, I will always be an advocate for fairness and equity. And there is nothing fair or equitable about a trial penalty whatsoever.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And thank you for all of the work that you're doing. And I'm hoping that other prosecutors would catch on and feel that spirit of doing right and creating an a just system, being fair, doing what's right. So Judge Sharp, wow, I have read so much about you, and I I learned about you. I have to be honest and share that, I stated earlier that I'm a criminal justice reform advocate, and that started with the advocacy for my very own brother, who went to trial and received a life sentence as well. I'm grateful that he's home now. In my advocacy, I was able to connect with a great attorney, and I advocated with organizations like FAMM, and that FAMM was the first organization that I learned about. And I remember just reading about you. The fact that you decided to resign from the bench, my understanding is it had a lot to do with the mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines that in the sentences that you were forced to give, and that Chris Young's case was a case that really touched your heart, and I'm sure that there were many others. So my first question for you, as a judge, how hard was it for you to know that the prosecutor had more power than you, and that you were forced to give a sentence to people and there was nothing you could do about it? It was all based on the guidelines. Share that with me.
Thank you for having me here and asking that question. You talked about the emotion of watching the film, and I've seen it several times now, and every time it takes me back to those days, that fateful day, but all through Chris's trial and then his sentencing, that are so tough and so important, such an important message that people need to hear and need to understand. So I really appreciate y'all doing this. It was when I took the bench, I'd been doing mostly civil rights work on the plaintiff side. When I took the bench, civil work, didn't know that much about the criminal system. But at one of my first meetings with the chief judge named Todd Campbell, said, look, of all the things that are going to happen here, the most important thing you are going to do is the criminal work, because these are people's lives. This is liberty at stake. And so this is the most important thing you can do. And I understood that and really took that to heart, which made mandatory minimums so much more difficult. That I had been hired and vetted by, the White House, the Department of Justice, the FBI, the Senate Judiciary Committee, even vetted by the American Bar Association, all to make sure that I had the intellect, the temperament to fulfill these duties in a fair way and an unbiased way. And then you get there, and that's not what's happening. What's happening is that the power, and it wasn't about me, it was about the position. The power had been shifted. You went through all of that work, and I jumped through all of those hoops so that you would have a fair neutral. Kevin talked about that. His hope was that he would get a fair judge who would listen to this. But then that shifted. I'm not making the calls. The neutral's not making the calls. The prosecutor's making the calls. You've shifted that kind of discretion away from the neutral third party, and you've put it in the hands of somebody with an interest in the outcome of this case. And so it really was so disheartening and devastating, because there were so many Chris Youngs. And Chris, you are unique. We are all unique, but in some ways, The people who pass through my courtroom and other courtrooms are not. They are all human beings who deserve to be treated like human beings, and we're not doing that. And that's what frustrated me. And Chris was really the poster child for everything that I thought was wrong with the system. He just epitomized that. And that day in the courtroom, that's shown a snippet of what happened that day. It goes on for an hour and a half. Is a snippet of that was really just. I couldn't let that go, and I had to do something about it. And that really did. You're right. That became a catalyst for me having to make my own internal decision. Am I more useful to society on the bench or off the bench? I can sit up here on the bench and complain every time Chris Young or someone like him comes through, or I can step down and say, look, I'm not going to do that. What I want to do is talk about real justice, real reform. And so I hope that's what I'm doing. It's what I'm trying to do. I hope it's effective. Chris is home.
Yes.
So we got one big win. And it's funny because every day I thought about Chris, and I still do.
Wow. Amazing. That actually just pulls at the heartstrings. It's one of those things that's very rare, but it's also one of those things that make you hopeful that other judges that think like you will be willing to help make change. So, Chris, congratulations. You just got home. And I was home the last day of President Trump's day in office. I kept scanning the pardon list to see who did I know that was going to be pardoned or receive a commutation. And when I saw your name, I just screamed out loud. And I know you don't know me, but I've known you. And so you had people in your corner that you never even knew that you had in your corner. So just to see you and to see the video of Judge Sharp being at the airport to greet you, and the hug and the love that you could see, that was just so warming. It really was. And it's all over the internet. So if anybody wants to take a look at it, it's easy to do. So you received a sentence reduction, I think, some months ago from a life sentence, but you went to prison as it showed in a documentary. You were 22 years old. And you turned down those plea deals because you knew you didn't deserve that much time. Or you felt you didn't deserve that much time. And I agree, you didn't deserve that much time. So having Judge Sharp and then your attorney, Miss Brittany K. Burnett, and also the support of Kim Kardashian. I mean, you had a major power team. But I want to go back the day that you received that sentence. And I've often heard about how well you speak and how compelling your remarks were. Just take us back to that day when you got ready to be sentenced. What was going on in your mind? Did you have any idea that you were going to receive such a sentence?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you to everybody for having me here today. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you. And I love the appreciation and support that you have for this topic and for my release. Thank you.
Welcome.
Back to August 28th, 2014. the day that I actually did know I was going to receive 2 life sentences plus 5 years ran consecutive. It was a day that unfortunately I had prepared for, because my sentence, as we have stated, it was mandatory. It was nothing Judge Sharp could do about it. It was nothing I could do about it. It was nothing my trial counsel could do about it. And the only thing I was hoping I could do about it was humanize me and my situation. Turn me from criminal defendant to Chris Young, the young man, the individual who had an unfortunate, rough childhood, who made some mistakes, who made some decisions that so many other young men in America are making due to the fact of lack of guidance and discipline, lack of influence. And so I was hoping I could come in there that day and change the minds of some of the people. So I was not ready, because who could be ready for their life to be taken? But I was determined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. This is so surreal. And I'm sure you and Kevin Sharp and everybody else that's been working on it is wanting to reach you and touch you. But in the midst of COVID, we can't do that. But it is good to see you on screen and to hear your voice and for you to share your thoughts. And I really appreciate that. So, Kevin, you have, I think, a unique perspective on this. One, understanding actually how this works firsthand. So when you are talking to other advocates, to other family members, because your organization talk with a lot of loved ones that have people incarcerated. And so many of them, they've gone to trial and they have experienced some of the same things. So how do you help them navigate that? How do you help bring change to this issue by using the voices of those that's indirectly impacted or directly impacted?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's really is the answer. There's no way you can know unless you've been in that position. And there's no way I can tell you through statistics and reports and charts how devastating and wrong and unfair these outcomes are. The best thing we can hope to do is show you the people. And as Chris said, when he was at sentencing, he tried to humanize himself. And that's what this film was made for. Talking about the trial penalty, people don't understand that. If you say 97% of people, give up their constitutional right to trial, that sounds like a civics lesson. What you need to see is, because people are watching Law and Order, or they're reading legal thrillers where every book or every episode ends in a trial, that doesn't happen anymore, because the system discourages that. And I always just say to people too, FAMM is not the Innocence Project. Chris said he made mistakes and he probably deserved to be held accountable. And everyone we work with says that. The question isn't whether somebody did something wrong. We all do. And it isn't whether somebody did something illegal. Most of us do at some point in our lives, and these folks got caught. The question is, are the punishments fair? Because everyone says, let the punishment fit the crime. Well, then the question is, what's the right punishment? And we wanted to show in this film that these punishments are completely out of whack. Our society would have been much worse off for Chris Young and for others to die in prison cells instead of getting a second chance to join society. So really the focus is on getting these stories in front of lawmakers and others so that they can see themselves in these people and realize we're doing something wrong.
Thank you. Attorney Morales, the enhancements. Let's talk about that. So in the documentary, it stated that even in Chris's case, that the enhancement did not come until after he turned down the plea deal. So how is that possible for a prosecutor to be able to do that to someone?
Well,
Why is it possible?
You're asking someone who is, a representative of what transformative change looks like.
Right.
Why something is in place, in a system that's a part of the status quo that I fight against. So I can't tell you why that exists other than to say that our system right now is working as it was designed to work. This is one of the things that was built into the fabric of the system. And one of the reasons why I say we truly have to dismantle it and transform it, because if we continue to work within the system as it operates, we're going to continue to see the impact, that we felt in the film, where you have a prosecutor who decides, well, you didn't do what I wanted you to do. So now I'm going to trigger this, enhanced punishment, or you didn't originally take the sentence that I wanted you to take. So now I'm going to up it by 10 years. These arbitrary decisions that are being made that are very harmful, very vindictive. And prosecutors are doing them either just because they can or because they intentionally want to harm people. Whatever the case may be, we know the impact that it has. It damages lives. It results in people's freedom being taken away. And, periods of incarceration that are extremely disproportionate. And in, the loss of a contributing, like we see Chris Young. This person, we need him contributing to our society. We don't need him incarcerated for life behind something that, is not a threat to anyone. And so I will never speak for something that I don't agree with, nor do I understand. I will never try to explain why this system is set up the way that it is. I'm here to transform it. And I've been here to transform it for the past 6 years that I've been in office before it was the cool thing to do. And I challenge anybody who is a part of my profession to try to explain why this does any good. And I don't think anyone will have an answer that would suffice, because we know that mass incarceration that we are now experiencing as a society in America, it is not making us any safer. It is truly, a system in place that is just disrupting our families and our society and our communities. So I hate to never, I don't like to not answer a question directly, but I think the real answer is that, we see how harmful it is, and we must do everything in our power to ensure that those who are empowered as prosecutors to make these type of decisions understand the gravity of getting this right by people and doing the fair thing, and not, arbitrarily creating these situations where people are backed into corners and are not able to exercise their rights.
Right. Well, thank you for standing up, and thank you for standing against it, and thank you for using your voice. I've noticed that you are not afraid to speak out, and I know sometimes that's an unpopular thing to do, but you do it anyway, and thank you for standing for what's right. Judge Sharp, is there anything that we can do to change this? How do you change the prosecutor's ability to add on enhancements after a person turns down a plea deal?
Well, I think what you've got to do is you go back. We have these branches of government, and they have things that we have a job. The judiciary has a job. The judge has a job to do. And what's happened is that Congress has taken those duties and shifted them. And I think that's the place to start. Mandatory minimums, which is the worst example. There are others. The enhancements is another example, but mandatory minimums, perfect example. What they've done is they've shifted the responsibility away from the judiciary to the prosecutor. Congress can stop that. What happens when you do that is you create a situation like Chris's, where we've taken someone who was and could have been an asset to the community, and we turn that person into a liability. But it was done by a legislature in this kind of theoretical sense. Let's show you how tough on crime we can be. we don't know, they don't know, that it's going to be Chris Young or so many others that I saw come through the system, particularly with regard to mandatory minimums, where I was forced to hand down a sentence that was way too harsh for the crime that had been committed. That can end. Once you end that, the system will begin to change. The other thing that happens is that prosecutors, at least at the federal level, and the junior, I'm sure this happens in the state level too, that everyone is evaluated. Their job performance is evaluated on how many convictions did you get, and how long were the sentences. Oh look, I got Chris Young 2 life sentences. Great job. Well, what? Great job. Somebody got a nice letter to their file for doing that. But as a society, and Chris as a human being, we're punished because of it. That has to end. That has to change. And I saw other, people, so many people like Chris, and it really had this, and Kevin mentioned it earlier, this skewed effect towards the minority community. And there was nothing I could do except to watch it happen and just watch the system grind people up. Human beings just grind them up. And, that's where I think we've got to stop it. And that comes back to people. Politicians talk about themselves as leaders, but they're really followers. And, at times they'll seem like the head of a parade. They look for the biggest parade and they'll jump out in front of it and, have everybody look, I'm leading this parade. No, they're not. They jumped out in front of a parade that was already moving. In order for real change to happen, people have to let their voices be heard with our members of Congress or their state legislatures. Let them know this is what we demand, and they will change. They'll follow. They will follow us. And, so that's where it's got to start. And we've seen it. We've seen it throughout history. They're not going to do it without pressure, because ultimately, Charlie Daniels was right. A politician wants another vote. Well, look, if you want my vote, then you're going to need to do the things that I think help society, not harm it. And that's changing this system for what, a place to start. But not to get off too much into a broader topic, which no one has got time for, but then the system happens because we want the criminal justice system to fix our problems, when instead what you've got to fix is, let's go back and fix our education system, fix our employment opportunity system, let's fix our transportation system. If all I've got for transportation is a bus system that doesn't work to get me on time from one section of town to another, then I'm stuck. And this cycle just continues. And that's hard for people to think about, because thinking is hard. And those are complicated issues. And so what happens is the politicians say, well, look, I've got to fix. I can't think about fixing employment opportunity. That's complicated. I can't think about fixing our education system. That's complicated. Why don't I make it a mandatory 15 years for, doing X, Y, Z, and then pat yourself on the back. It's complicated. I agree, but it doesn't mean we don't try.
Right. I totally agree with that. I think that many people feel powerless, and they don't understand that they can talk to their lawmakers. They can write to them. They can call them. They can meet with them. And that's what they're there for. And so I think if more people were able to do that and tried that and was aware that they hold some type of power, I think we could move the needle forward some. So, Chris, I just have so many questions for you, but I know I can't get to all of them today. But one, this is going to be maybe a 2 or 3 part question. One, do you feel like you were a part of the school to prison pipeline. Do you, when you went to prison, did you feel that there were the tools and resources available to you to help you move forward, to develop you or educate you in any way? Do you think that there were, before you went to prison, do you think that the opportunities were there? You know, in terms of education and economics and, you know, job opportunities, things put in place before even actually going to prison that you could have used to help you along?
That's a great question. And that question coincides with what Judge Sharp was trying to articulate. Unfortunately, the school to prison pipeline is inundated and is going to stay inundated and keep flooding this system with human beings, not just numbers and defendants, but human beings, until we change the education problem. And yes, when I was younger, financial literacy was not properly taught at the schools I attended. You were not taught the difference between a MLP, a LLC, and being fully incorporated. You wasn't taught what an ETF was, what a stock, what a bond, or what SPACs are, you know, special purpose acquisition companies. These are things that are need to be taught to individuals so they can progress in the broader economy. And unfortunately, that's what most drug problems consist of. It consists of an individual that has an addiction or an individual that doesn't know how to enter into the legal economy the right way. He's an entrepreneur at heart. He's just choosing the wrong way to apply himself. He has the ambition. He has the work ethic. He doesn't have the legal product. He doesn't have the legal structure. He's not incorporated, so forth and so on. So unfortunately, that is one of the main problems right there. Financial literacy, corporate knowledge is not spread about in our school system. It is not taught. It is not something that is fostered and cultivated properly. Second of all, when I did get to prison, no ma'am. I am the first to speak out with no hesitation that the Federal Bureau of Prisons does not adequately provide training and programming and assistance within individuals who are trying to learn how to progress within the broader society, within corporate America, within just being creative. You're not given the access to technology first and foremost. And that leaves the country, that leaves our economy. Right now, not only because of the pandemic, but due to the fact that America is the most developed country, technology rules our economy. And how can a person reintegrate into society and properly thrive in the economy if he doesn't have access to technology? We aren't even allowed to learn about it properly. I myself tried to teach a computer programming class and I was denied. I was told that is not allowed to be done. And that is unfortunate. And the third part of your question, the world has access. It has the means, it has the resources for everyone to thrive, for everyone to be successful, for everyone to be happy. The main thing we have to do is realize how to apply it, how to utilize it. It's not a lack of resources, it's a lack of application. It's not being properly put to its most use, its most beneficial use. And if individuals were released and was given the opportunity to be looked at like a human being and not just as a former defendant or a former inmate or a former prisoner, just looked at as a human being, a husband, a wife, a father, a son, a mother, an uncle, a cousin, an auntie, whatever that human being's title should be, it should be given a title that has that level of dignity that comes with being a judge or a lawyer or a prosecutor or a stockbroker or a CEO. We need to give these people their dignity back and help them in the way that they can be able to survive and thrive mentally, physically, financially, emotionally.
Well said. Thank you. Okay, so I think we have time for last words. So I'm just going to go back around, and we didn't have a lot of time for a lot of discussion, but I think we have been able to bring out some great stuff. And I'm sure you've answered some questions that some of our audience would love to have answered. So I'm going to go back around, starting with you, Kevin. Anything that you would like to say about, the documentary, about what you're doing at FAMM, how people can get involved, just any last words that anyone would like to say. So
yeah, I really want to tie up some of the things that people said. First of all, when I sit on a panel with someone like Chris, I get the chance to do that, somewhat often. I want people to look at a system that was willing to have him die in prison, to spend another 50 or 60 years and die alone in a prison cell, and think, what system that calls itself a justice system would have produced that result? I can't give a better argument than that. I also want to say that bad systems produce bad results, and we cannot just rely on superhero individuals. Judge Sharp left a life tenured position because he thought the system was so unjust. Attorney Morales is fighting the justice system from within. It should not take that much bravery. The system, we can't rely on superheroes. We've got to change the system so that the system incentivizes good outcomes and not makes them fight upstream to get good outcomes. And I'll say to this end, change is possible. And in Virginia, where we're fighting to repeal mandatory minimums, Attorney Morales and a group of prosecutors representing 40% of the residents of that state led that effort with us to say we should get rid of these mandatory sentencing laws. So you have prosecutors who are usually the ones saying we want these laws because it makes us, our job easier and we can threaten people and get plea deals. You have them saying, I don't need this to keep my community safe. In fact, I don't think this makes my community safe. That's a game changer. So we can make a difference. We've got to change the system, though, so we don't have to ask people to do superhuman things. No system will, thrive if we do that. We've just got to create a better system, things that don't put somebody like Chris Young in prison for the rest of their life. So I'm actually think we're making progress. And I think the most important thing is having discussions like this and people using whatever platform they have to speak out. And again, Chris has come out of prison and he would be totally entitled to just enjoy his life, eat a lot of food, sit on the couch and watch TV. Instead, he's joining Brittany Barnett at Buried Alive, and he's going to fight for people he left behind. That's what needs to happen.
Absolutely. All right, Attorney Morales, please share your last thoughts.
So my last thoughts are, I need everyone within the sound of my voice and beyond to listen to Chris Young, because there is nothing like hearing from those who have been personally impacted and had their lives, forever reshaped by the harms that this system has done. There's nothing like hearing directly from that person, and there's nothing like the actual voice, of the people who have suffered as a result being heard. And I want to do everything within my power to uplift your voice, Chris, to uplift your voice, Kevin, and to have an opportunity for those who are in the positions of power to understand the gravity of the decisions that they make, so that while we are working on transformative change, there can be no plausible deniability. The harm that you're doing. And I think many people who pretend like they don't understand the harm, they really know it. Nobody is blind to what is happening. But the more we can get your stories out and the more your voices are heard and uplifted, the less foolishness we have to deal with individuals in my position and who have power, pretending like they don't know the harm that they're doing. And that makes it easy for communities to hold them accountable and say, we don't want you here. because we know what you are perpetuating. So I want to thank you guys for uplifting your voices and for being willing to tell your stories and put all of that on display, the harm that was done to your families and everything like that for people to see. And finally, I will say, I want to remind people that moving the needle or incremental change, that's a failure. We simply don't have the time to allow anybody else to suffer greatly like these guys have suffered because of the ills of this system and the status quo. We truly have to fight for transformative change, legislative reform, putting prosecutors in place who will use their discretion to get things right. And just never allow anyone to make us feel comfortable with incremental change, because that will result in generations of more harm. So I want to, again, thank everyone for the work that you do. Thank you for being willing to share your truth and to speak up and speak truth to power about what people are experiencing in our communities. And I will remain a fighter with all of you in this effort to see true justice in our society.
Thank you. Thank you. Judge Sharp, last words, please.
You know, I think one of the most important things that people watching and listening can do is recognize their own power, that they really are not and don't have to be bystanders to this system that is not working. They need to speak up. They need to let the politicians know. They need to let anyone who will listen to them know, and keep talking. Once you quit, we're stuck with this, and this system is grinding people up. And you know, even those who are not reformers now, or you know, those who understand the system because they've had some kind of contact with it, although that's a lot of people, they need to understand that this is in their interest as well. These are human beings. They happen to be in an orange jumpsuit when I see them, but they're people. And if you look at their histories, you can understand how they got here. It has nothing to do with crime as much as it has to do with their circumstance. And it's a circumstance that we can change. Chris said it earlier. It's not resources, it's will. Do they have the will to make this change? Sometimes it's easier to go, not my problem. You know, that's somebody else's neighborhood. That's somebody else's family member, but it's all of our issue. So, you know, that's, if nothing else gets across, you don't have to be someone in a black robe. You don't have to have a law degree. All you have to do is speak up.
Yes. Thank you. Chris, please share with us your last words. I'm sure so many people, just like myself, just love listening to you talk and share your story. But if whatever you have to say, whatever your last words are for this group of people that's listening to you, something that you want them to know, please share.
First off, let me say thank you again. I'm the least distinguished amongst you all, so it's an honor and a privilege to be sitting amongst you. I
would disagree with you on that, but so go ahead.
Humanity has to look at humanity as just that, as we are one of the same species. We should not treat each other like trash or the opposition or enemies or anything of that nature. It's cliche and it's redundant, but we need more love. We need each other to look at each other and realize that this is a living, breathing human being. This is a person that has to be fed, has to be nurtured, has to be loved. And that is what's lacking. On top of that, us as individuals, personally, we have to realize our mentality equals our reality. What we allow ourselves to think and believe is how we will act, and how we will act will bring about the next situation that we will have to react to. So we have to be conscious of what we are choosing and what we are doing. And unfortunately, right now, humanity is not conscious of what they're doing. What we are doing is picking reasons to be divisive and to turn on each other and treat each other like an inmate or a prisoner instead of a human being, instead of a person who unfortunately just doesn't understand corporate law. And that's all they really needs, because he could be just as great as any other CEO, but unfortunately he has access to drugs. He doesn't have access to getting the articles of incorporation filed for a company and then going about and outsourcing and getting the cheapest product and then selling it, whether it be t-shirts or cans or suits or glasses. What he doesn't have is the knowledge of how this internet runs and how he can get on here and make a web page. He doesn't have access to that. So unfortunately, what he does have access to is the illegal drugs that's in his neighborhood. And so he chooses that. It's not because he wants to, it's because it's what he has access to. So we need to make it where we have more access to the resources so he can thrive in the legal economy and not just survive in the illegal economy and be thrown away like he's a piece of trash, because that is not what he is. What he is an individual who's unfortunately not having access to everything that others have access to. So we need to give him access to all the opportunities and the resources that's possible. We need to love each other and we need to treat each other like human beings.
Now, how can you top that? Anybody? Not at all. So I want to thank each of you for joining us for this very, very important panel discussion regarding the documentary, The Vanishing Trial, and beyond. This has been a wonderful conversation. It is my hope that people will get involved. It is my hope that people will love more. It is my hope that people will reach out to the lawmakers, that they will reach out to organizations that's doing the work, and that they would open their hearts and minds and want to understand more about this criminal legal system that's supposed to be a criminal justice system. So again, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for Journey to Justice, the Vanishing Trial virtual screening and panel discussion. We must get involved and work towards a just criminal legal system for everyone. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stated, "It is not possible to be in favor of justice for some people and not be in favor of justice for all people." It is my hope that you have been inspired to learn more about the issues that are impacting our communities. Get involved in making change and or support organizations that are doing the work. I invite you to visit our website at civilrightsmuseum.org for more information about our museum and our robust programming. Again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Veda. We were so grateful to partner with you and the National Civil Rights Museum, partly because of the museum's rich history, but also because you are a shining example of what one person can do as an advocate. I saw firsthand that when you went to Washington, D.C., your members of Congress knew who you were and knew your brother's story. And we need 1 million people like you if we're going to change this system. So if you want to get involved, if the film not only taught you something but made you angry and you want to make a difference, I encourage you to join FAMM in the fight to eliminate mandatory sentencing laws and create a more just system.